We're counting down 25 dinners, each built from just 3 ingredients, that kept American families alive through the 1940s and have since been almost completely forgotten. These weren't crude meals. They were quiet acts of genius, created by women who transformed wartime rations and near-empty pantries into food that sustained households with dignity. From no-cook suppers that cost a dime to slow-simmered pots built on scraps the government never even rationed, every entry on this countdown reveals a practical brilliance the modern kitchen has lost. Most still cost almost nothing to make today, yet they've vanished from the American table. We begin at number 25, with a simple pasta that turned a wartime butter shortage into something unexpectedly satisfying. Number 25. Spaghetti with olive oil and parmesan offered a taste of comfort when butter was out of reach. At a time when ration stamps dictated every purchase and butter was strictly limited, some coastal families found an unexpected loophole. Olive oil, considered a specialty import, escaped the ration book's grip. Home cooks, especially in Italian-American neighborhoods, leaned on this unrationed staple, tossing hot spaghetti with a generous pour of oil and a dusting of grated parmesan. The result was a dish that felt rich, even when the pantry was bare. According to a 1943 Ladies' Home Journal feature and OPA recipe flyers, this 3-ingredient supper became a symbol of clever substitution, transforming what was available into something that felt like plenty. Though olive oil was pricier than lard or margarine, the meal's simplicity and dignity set it apart, showing how thrift could still deliver satisfaction at the table. Number 24. Rice pilaf offered a lesson in making a little go a long way. With just a cup of long-grain rice, 2 cups of chicken broth, and a pinch of salt, home cooks could transform the plainest grain into a meal that carried the memory of meat, even when none was left in the icebox. The broth often came from simmered garden scraps or the last shreds of a Sunday chicken, reused until every drop of flavor was pulled from bone and peel. This one-pot method, featured in the USDA's 1943 Victory Garden recipes, required no refrigeration and could be stretched to feed several, making it a favorite for seniors living on fixed incomes. Rice pilaf's quiet thrift speaks of a time when efficiency was a virtue. Every spoonful, a reflection of careful planning and the pride of making something nourishing from nearly nothing. Number 23. Sardine toast offered a bracing answer to wartime protein shortages without ever touching the ration book. In 1944, the Office of Price Administration released its Seafood for the Home Front pamphlet, urging families to look to unrationed canned fish as a reliable source of nutrition. A single can of sardines, packed in oil, spread across slices of buttered rye toast, became a meal rich in omega-3 fatty acids and calcium at a fraction of the cost of fresh meat. In New England, local newspapers promoted this simple dish as both a lunch and a portable supper, especially for seniors living alone. Sardines, never subject to ration stamps, stood out as an affordable, shelf-stable protein when options were slim. While the bold flavor kept it from widespread popularity, sardine toast remains a testament to the era's resourcefulness, an economical, nutrient-dense meal that deserves a second look today. Number 22. Cornmeal pancakes turned an unrationed grain into the backbone of countless breakfasts. In the Nebraska countryside, a 1944 USDA Extension bulletin described how farm families whisked a cup of fine cornmeal with water and milk, then poured the batter onto a hot griddle. The result was sturdy, golden cakes that fueled long mornings in the fields. Leftovers never went to waste. Yesterday's pancakes were fried crisp the next day, stretching every ingredient. Cornmeal, untouched by wartime rationing, became a lifeline for families on fixed incomes, offering slow-release energy at a fraction of the cost of wheat flour. Home economists praised these pancakes for their staying power, even if their flavor was plain. Rural extension agents promoted cornmeal as a flexible staple, setting the stage for its repeat appearances in other thrifty dishes. The quiet genius lay in turning what was abundant and affordable into a meal that lasted well beyond breakfast. Number 21. Butter noodles brought a rare taste of luxury to the wartime table. With butter tightly rationed, a plate of egg noodles tossed in melted butter and finished with a dusting of parmesan felt almost extravagant. Good Housekeeping's June 1943 column called it a victory dish, a quick, morale-boosting supper for families who had to make every ration stamp count. The recipe called for just 2 cups of cooked noodles, 1/4 cup of precious butter, and 2 tablespoons of grated parmesan. In the Great Plains, where egg noodles were common, this meal became a quiet celebration, reserved for days when a little comfort was needed most. While butter noodles required careful planning and ration stamps, the dish offered a reminder that even in times of scarcity, a few simple ingredients could create something that felt rich, dignified, and worth remembering. Number 20. Vinegar bread turned wartime scarcity into a lesson in flavor chemistry. When lemons disappeared from grocers' shelves and sugar was rationed to the ounce, home cooks reached for apple cider vinegar and a handful of sugar, whisking the vinegar and sugar with a spoonful of starch or some leftover milk to create a glossy, tangy curd. Spread thick on slices of day-old bread, the result was a makeshift dessert that mimicked the sharp sweetness of lemon curd, offering a rare treat at breakfast or after supper. The Office of Price Administration's substitution tables encouraged vinegar as a stand-in for citrus, and Victory Kitchen newsletters praised the result as a triumph of thrift. Though no single printed recipe survives, oral histories recall the pride women took in this invention, transforming what was on hand into something bright and unexpected. Vinegar bread stands as proof that even in the leanest years, resourcefulness could conjure a taste of joy from almost nothing. Number 19. Ham bone broth and bread stands as a lesson in zero-waste cooking. After the Sunday roast, the ham bone, once destined for the scrap bucket, became the centerpiece of Monday's supper. Dropped into a large pot and simmered for 2 hours, the bone released every last trace of flavor and collagen, transforming plain water into a rich, savory broth. According to household ledgers and church supper diaries from the Midwest, this broth was often ladled into bowls set around the table, with thick slices of stale bread ready for dipping. The meal was communal, stretching the memory of meat into a second day, and making sure nothing was wasted. While it required a prior purchase of ham, the broth itself was considered free, a reward for thrift and planning. In kitchens shaped by rationing, this practice underscored a circular economy, where every scrap found a purpose and every meal honored the effort behind it. Number 18. Sweet potato and molasses brought together. Nourishment and memory in a single bowl. At a time when vitamin-rich foods were scarce, sweet potatoes offered a rare abundance of beta-carotene and fiber for just 5 cents a pound. Home cooks, especially in southern black communities, drew on church cookbook traditions, boiling or baking sweet potatoes until soft, then drizzling them with a spoonful of sorghum or blackstrap molasses. Molasses, sold in gallon jugs for around 40 cents, was both affordable and packed with minerals. The result was a naturally sweet, deeply satisfying supper that bridged African-American heritage with wartime necessity. This dish did more than fill empty stomachs. It preserved a sense of pride and continuity, offering comfort and health in a single, 3-ingredient meal. Even now, sweet potato and molasses remains one of the most nutrient-dense, budget-friendly combinations left from the era's kitchen ingenuity. Number 17, hominy and fatback offered more than just calories. They delivered a quiet lesson in nutritional science on Southern and Carolina lowland tables. Hominy, made by soaking dried corn in an alkaline solution, unlocked niacin that plain cornmeal could not provide. This process, known as nixtamalization, was crucial in preventing pellagra, a disease that once haunted poor families living on corn-heavy diets. Simmering canned or dried hominy with strips of pork fatback created a dish that was both affordable and sustaining. The pork fat supplied protein and essential fats, while the hominy provided carbohydrates and bioavailable vitamin B3. State extension bulletins from the 1930s and the early 1940s urged families to combine these two ingredients, not just for flavor, but for health. In a time when a few cents decided what went on the table, this meal stands as a testament to the hidden intelligence behind even the simplest recipes. Number 16, peanut butter and bread, stood at the crossroads of thrift and nutrition during the hardest years of wartime rationing. When meat was scarce and ration points ran thin, the War Food Administration promoted peanut butter as the affordable protein that could fill the gap. In 1942, a jar cost just 18 cents, making it one of the cheapest sources of protein per calorie available to American families. School lunch menus and government circulars encouraged parents to spread it thick on slices of bread, offering a no-cook dinner that required no stamps, no stove, and no waiting in line. Peanut butter delivered more protein by weight than most meats, and its shelf life meant it could anchor the pantry through lean months. Even today, this meal costs little to prepare, yet it rarely appears on modern tables, a reminder of how wartime ingenuity turned simple staples into sustenance and dignity. Number 15. Crackers and milk offered a quiet kind of comfort when the kitchen was cold and the cupboards nearly bare. In rural Kentucky and across Appalachia, oral histories recall this as the meal of last resort, yet never without a sense of dignity. A bowl of broken saltines, poured over with cold or warmed milk, stood in for supper when the stove had gone out for the night, or when bread was already gone. Boarding house ledgers from the 1940s list crackers at just 10 cents a box, making this a meal accessible even to families living on the edge. For children, it was sometimes a treat, a gentle end to a day of hard work or worry. The simplicity of crackers and milk was not a defeat, but a resourceful answer to scarcity, one that preserved a sense of home and care with almost nothing at all. In these stories, the act of pouring milk over crackers becomes a gesture of quiet resilience, a way of saying that even the simplest meal could carry warmth and meaning. Number 14. Fried potatoes and onions brought the magic of caramelization to the center of the wartime table. In kitchens where meat was a rare luxury and every scrap mattered, home cooks leaned on a single skillet and a patient hand. Sliced potatoes and onions, sometimes rescued from the back of the bin, went into a pan with a slick of bacon grease, or whatever fat was on hand. The trick was low and slow cooking, 25 minutes of careful turning that allowed the natural sugars in the onions to brown and mingle with the starch of the potatoes. Diaries from factory wives and period newspaper columns describe the aroma as a kind of reward after a long day, proof that even the humblest ingredients could yield deep, satisfying flavor. This meal required no ration stamps, just time and watchfulness, trading labor for taste. The result was a dish that filled the kitchen with warmth, and for many, a sense of abundance that belied its simplicity. Number 13. Bean and corn porridge draws its strength from an ancient partnership that predates the ration book by centuries. Indigenous communities across North America understood that combining beans with corn didn't just fill the pot, it created a complete protein, supplying all the essential amino acids needed for human health. This knowledge, passed down through tribal foodways and later adopted by rural extension bulletins in the 1940s, offered families a scientific edge in the face of scarcity. A simple recipe called for simmering dried beans until tender, then stirring in cracked corn or hominy and letting the mixture thicken over low heat. With no need for expensive meat or dairy, the dish delivered the nutritional equivalent of a much costlier meal. In regions where both crops were staples, this porridge became a quiet triumph of necessity and wisdom, an example of how the overlooked intelligence of everyday cooks could turn humble ingredients into real sustenance. Today, its legacy endures as a lesson in both thrift and respect for the original American table. Number 12, rice and canned salmon offered a discreet but vital form of nourishment for older Americans during the war years. In 1943, Office of Price Administration seafood flyers promoted canned pink salmon as a thrifty protein, selling for just 22 cents a can, more expensive than beans, but justified by its shelf life and nutrient density. The preparation was almost ritual. The entire can, bones and all, was mashed into a bowl of hot rice. The soft salmon bones, easily chewed and swallowed, delivered a dose of calcium that many seniors could not afford to miss, especially when milk and fresh vegetables were scarce. Medical advice columns of the era quietly encouraged this meal for its bone-strengthening value, noting that the edible bones outperformed most other affordable foods in terms of mineral content. For families on fixed incomes, rice and canned salmon was more than a stopgap. It was a carefully chosen solution to the silent problem of brittle bones and waning strength. The dish stands as a reminder that, even in times of scarcity, nutritional wisdom could hide in the simplest combinations. Number 11, salt pork and cabbage stands as a tribute to the cross-currents of American food culture and the quiet brilliance of home cooks who made flavor out of scarcity. In Pennsylvania, Dutch farm records from the early 1940s, a head of cabbage cost just 7 cents, an investment that could stretch across several meals. The preparation was deceptively simple. Thick slices of salt pork, often the last affordable cut left after the butcher's case was picked over, went into the bottom of a heavy pot. Shredded cabbage was piled high on top. Then the whole thing was left to simmer for hours. As the pork fat melted, it seeped through the cabbage, lending a depth and sweetness that belied the meal's humble origins. The long, slow cook transformed the greens, softening their bite and infusing them with a richness that made even the plainest bread seem like a feast. This dish traveled across ethnic lines, adopted by Irish, German, and Eastern European families alike, each adding their own practical wisdom to the pot. Salt pork and cabbage offered more than calories. It delivered comfort, community, and a sense of dignity, proving that ingenuity could coax satisfaction from the simplest of ingredients. Number 10. Macaroni and canned tomatoes brought a sense of abundance to the table, even when the pantry was nearly bare. In Southern church cookbooks from the 1940s, this recipe appears again and again. It called for a 1-pound box of macaroni, a can of tomatoes, and a spoonful of reserved bacon grease from the breakfast skillet. Together, these 3 ingredients could feed a family of 5 for under 10 cents, with enough left over to stretch into the next day's lunch. The trick was in the bacon grease. Just a tablespoon saved in a coffee tin transformed plain tomatoes and pasta into something smoky, savory, and deeply satisfying. For many, this dish was more than a meal. It was a reliable answer to hunger, a way to stretch a single pot into 2 sittings, and a reminder that thrift and flavor could go hand in hand. The memory of that smoky aroma lingers, even as the dish itself has faded from modern kitchens. Number 9. Cornbread and pot liquor stands as a testament to the wisdom of making every ingredient count, especially in southern kitchens shaped by scarcity. After a pot of collard or turnip greens simmered for hours with a bit of fatback or a ham hock, the remaining broth, known as pot liquor, was never discarded. It was poured into bowls and served with wedges of crumbly cornbread, creating a meal that rescued every last mineral and vitamin from the garden. Nutrition studies from the era found that pot liquor was packed with iron, calcium, and vitamin K, nutrients that children desperately needed when dairy and meat were out of reach. Oral histories and church supper records describe how mothers would encourage their children to drink the broth, sometimes calling it medicine in a cup. In many households, this practice was more than thrift. It was a daily act of care, turning what others might throw away into a nourishing, restorative supper. Cornbread and pot liquor reveal a tradition where nothing was wasted and every drop was honored. 8th place, egg drop broth, stands as a quiet act of care in the wartime kitchen. When illness or exhaustion left a family member too weak for solid food, a simple pot of broth and 2 eggs offered both nourishment and comfort. Home economics recovery menus from the 1940s often called for this gentle meal, noting that even hands made frail by fever could manage to stir the eggs into ribbons. The technique, slowly pouring beaten eggs into simmering broth, created a dish as soothing to watch as it was to eat, the golden threads swirling gently in the bowl. For less than 15 cents, mothers could deliver a warm, protein-rich supper that required no chewing and little effort, making it ideal for convalescents or the elderly. In those years, food was more than sustenance. It was a daily gesture of nurturing, a way to restore strength and dignity with the barest means. Egg drop broth reminds us that, even in scarcity, the smallest acts of care could transform the dinner table into a place of healing. Number 7. Navy bean soup and crackers carried the weight of Monday nights in homes, school cafeterias, and even the halls of Congress. From the Midwest to the Eastern Seaboard, a single pound of dried navy beans, costing around 10 cents, could be simmered with water and salt to fill a large pot, stretching to feed a family or a classroom. School lunch records from the 1940s list this dish as a mainstay, prized for its ability to deliver protein and calories at scale, while keeping costs firmly in check. In the United States Senate, navy bean soup has appeared on the daily menu since 1903, a tradition that speaks to its reputation for reliability and economy. Crackers, served alongside, added bulk and texture, making each bowl more filling. The soup's reach extended beyond the household, linking domestic thrift to civic ritual and reminding families that the same simple fare could sustain both a child at their desk and a senator at his bench. This institutional embrace of navy bean soup set the stage for later focus on micronutrients. But in the 1940s, its chief virtue was sheer volume, an enduring answer to the challenge of feeding many with little. Number 6. Canned tomatoes over rice offered a lifeline of vitamins when winter stripped gardens bare. In the 1940s, home economists and the Office of Price Administration urged families to rely on canned produce, warning that scurvy and other deficiencies could still threaten those living on bread and fat alone. A single can of tomatoes, priced at just 12 cents, poured over a bowl of hot rice, which cost 19 cents for a 2-pound bag, brought a burst of color and a vital dose of vitamin C to the table. Extension leaflets from the era praised this meal for its power to keep children healthy through the leanest months, when fresh fruit was a distant memory. The simplicity was its strength. Rice filled stomachs, tomatoes safeguarded health, and the cost stayed within reach for even the poorest families. Today, this combination remains one of the most affordable ways to put both calories and micronutrients on the plate. Yet it has faded almost entirely from modern kitchens. Canned tomatoes over rice stands as quiet proof that a pantry staple, chosen with care, could protect a family's well-being through the hardest seasons. In the fifth place, milk toast stands as a ritual of comfort that turned scarcity into an act of quiet choice. In kitchens shaped by ration books and wartime anxiety, mothers would tear day-old bread, often bought for just 9 cents a loaf, into bowls and pour over warm milk, which cost about 15 cents a quart. A pinch of sugar, if it could be spared, transformed the dish from mere survival into a gentle treat. Oral histories and home economics pamphlets from the era recall how this simple supper soothed children at bedtime or offered solace to the sick. Milk toast was never just about filling a stomach. It was about restoring a sense of normalcy and care when the world outside felt uncertain. For many elders, the memory of milk toast is tied to the dignity and ingenuity of women who made even the humblest meal feel chosen, not imposed. In the landscape of poor man dinners, it marks a peak of nostalgia, proof that the heart of the home could be sustained by almost nothing, yet still offer warmth and reassurance. In the fourth place, fried salt pork and gravy stands as a masterclass in turning preserved meat into a full-bodied supper. Salt pork, a staple that could last for months without refrigeration, was often the last protein left in the larder when fresh cuts ran out. Rural manuals and veteran accounts from the 1940s describe how a slab of salt pork, sliced and fried crisp in its own fat, could anchor an entire meal. The real ingenuity came in the next step. Cooks would sprinkle flour into the shimmering drippings, stirring until a thick golden gravy formed. Poured over day-old bread or boiled potatoes, this combination delivered deep, savory flavor and a stick-to-your-ribs satisfaction for about 30 cents. A full supper at a time when every penny mattered. This dish did more than fill empty stomachs. It showcased the skill of rendering every ounce of fat into something sustaining, setting the stage for the hearty, potato-based suppers that dominated the top spots in poor man's dinners. Fried salt pork and gravy is a reminder that flavor and resourcefulness can go hand in hand, even when the cupboard is nearly bare. Coming to the top three, potato and onion soup stands as a quiet monument to the ingenuity of immigrant kitchens. In the 1940s, a 5-pound sack of potatoes could be found for just 23 cents, making it one of the most reliable lifelines for families living on the edge. With only 3 potatoes, a single onion, and a pot of water, home cooks, often drawing on Irish and Eastern European traditions, could conjure a soup that thickened itself without flour or cream. The starch released from the potatoes as they simmered would turn the broth creamy, while the onions lent sweetness and depth, transforming the most basic ingredients into a meal that felt both filling and gentle. This soup required no roux, no butter, and no ration stamps, just patience and a steady hand. For many, it was more than sustenance. It was a lesson in how roots could stretch a budget and sustain a household with dignity. Before grain-based mashes and porridges took their place in the rotation, potato and onion soup anchored the evening table, proof that thrift and care could coax comfort from even the humblest roots. Today, its memory lingers mostly in old cookbooks and family stories, a reminder that resilience once simmered quietly on every stove. In second place, cornmeal mush with sorghum stands as a symbol of endurance on the plains and throughout the South, where a 10-pound sack of coarse cornmeal could be had for just 39 cents. The method was as straightforward as it was ingenious. Cornmeal whisked into boiling water, stirred until thick, then poured into pans to set. Supper began as a steaming, spoonable mush, warm and filling after a day's labor. But the real magic came with the leftovers. Sliced and fried crisp the next morning, the mush transformed into a golden breakfast, ready to soak up the deep sweetness of sorghum syrup. Sorghum, cheaper than honey and packed with minerals, was the flavor of both thrift and abundance in regions where sugar was a luxury. Church cookbooks and USDA bulletins of the 1940s praised this meal for its ability to stretch across days, offering slow-burning energy from a grain untouched by rationing. In its quiet way, cornmeal mush with sorghum outlasted many richer dishes, proving that with care and a bit of syrup, even the humblest grain could anchor a household through lean times. And finally, in first place, beans and fatback stand as the ultimate synthesis of thrift, nutrition, and domestic dignity on the wartime table. In the Appalachian foothills and across southern kitchens, a pot of dried beans and a slab of fatback became more than just a meal. They were a daily ritual of survival, watched over with the same care as bread rising or soup simmering on Sunday. At 8 cents a pound for fatback and 10 cents for 2 pounds of beans, even the tightest budget could stretch to feed a family for days. Oral histories from West Virginia church kitchens and handwritten ledgers in camp meeting logs tell of mothers and grandmothers who soaked beans overnight, then simmered them slowly with diced fatback, coaxing every drop of flavor and sustenance from the pot. The slow cook did more than soften the beans. It transformed them, unlocking a complete amino acid profile and creating a protein as nourishing as any cut of meat. Home economists of the era marveled that with nothing but beans, pork fat, and a pinch of salt, families could meet every nutritional need for pennies a serving. The phrase, "the pot watched itself," echoes through these stories, a testament to the meal's reliability and the way it freed women's hands for other work, even as it filled the house with the scent of something deeply sustaining. More than any other dish, beans and fatback became the backbone of the wartime diet, appearing in oral tradition, church bulletins, and government pamphlets alike. The memory of this meal is not one of deprivation, but of pride, a reminder that the intelligence of ordinary cooks could turn the humblest ingredients into a dinner that nourished both body and spirit. Today, the cost remains negligible, yet the practice has nearly vanished, leaving behind a legacy of resilience that deserves to be remembered at every American table. Across all 25 dishes, one pattern stands out. Necessity became invention. These meals are not relics of poverty, they are blueprints of resilience, crafted by women who transformed scarcity into daily dignity. Their practical genius turned 3 ingredients into sustenance and stability. Today, such resourcefulness is nearly lost, even as affordability remains urgent. Remembering these recipes means honoring the overlooked intelligence that once defined the American kitchen. Which dish surprised you most? Share your thoughts below.